Hi, welcome to Something Simple and Light with Tolu Alao. In this podcast, we talk about three key areas: process improvements, manufacturing excellence, data analytics, and visualization. The goal of this podcast is to discuss practical ways to improve your operations day in, day out. Wow, there's so much to cover in this episode, and I really hope that you pick one or two things. Let's jump into today's discussion. Welcome to today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about variation. And variation is such an important topic when it comes to operations, process improvements, and even manufacturing excellence, right? And I'll just give you a quick structure as to what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. So we're going to define what variance means or what variation means. We're also going to, talk about ways in which you can measure variation. I will talk about the types of variation we have and also talk about ways to, reduce or eliminate variation. Wow, this episode is packed, and I'm hoping that you would stay till the end of the episode to get the full gist and understand variance or variation very well. All right, let's start with the definition. So when we talk about variation, what do we mean? When we say something has some form of variation and all of that, what does that mean? Right? So variation or variance has to do with differences between products, right, or services within the same operations. Remember again that operations are supposed to be, repetitive, right? I'm supposed to go through an operation to produce a specific product or a specific service. So let's go back to our eatery example. And by now you would have noticed that I like to use eateries, maybe because I like food. Yeah, but back to our eatery example, right? So imagine you go to an eatery and you ask for jollof rice, and then you go on Monday, you eat jollof rice. It's wonderful, it's nice, it's not soggy, it looks fantastic, it tastes even better, and all of that, right? And then you go again on Tuesday. So let's say you have this ritual where every time you have lunch, you go to this particular restaurant to, have your lunch, and then you order for same jollof rice. Only that this time around it tastes different. There's just something about the taste that is different. Maybe this time around it's a bit salty, or it's soggy, or even looks different. It feels like maybe they use a different oil, or something has just changed, in that taste, and you cannot place your finger on that. And that is what, variation is all about. When you have differences amongst products or amongst services in the same operation, you're asking for the same products, and then you're having some form of differences, right? And then you know that something is wrong, right? And in our operations, right, variance is something, or variation is something that we do not want, because when you have a process that is not predictable, that you cannot count on to deliver on a particular product or service, then your customers cannot trust that they can expect the same level of quality. In fact, sometimes the variance is such that it's even better. So the product tastes maybe a bit better than it used to taste before. And then, customers now have a higher expectation. And then you go back to your normal standard and everybody is like, what's happening here? Right. So you don't want any form of variance or variation in your product. You want customers to, be able to taste your product and be sure and comfortable to know that, this product is from this person. This is the quality to expect. And then even from your own point of view, right, the business owner, the person in charge of your operation, it also means that you are able to, properly plan your raw materials, plan your operations, plan your people, because you know that this is what is required and this is what you would get, right? So for instance, let me give you another example. So let's say you produce some form of drink or beverage and there's some form of variation in the volume. So when customers ask for 50 centiliters, right, what we are used to, and then some customers get 60, some get 45. What that is going to do for your process is that you're going to be either getting customers who are disgruntled because they are consistently getting below that standard of 50 cl, right? Or you have customers who keep expecting more and you're running out of business because you are consistently giving customers way above that standard. So somebody gets 60 centiliter, another person gets 75, another person gets 55, right? And all of that chaos creates variation in your process. So
Variation is the enemy of consistency, right? It's the enemy of running a good operations. It's the enemy of, repeatability and all of that. So you want a process where you can predict that this is the raw materials I need, this is the output, this is how much, finished products I can expect based on all of this, right? And that's because you do not have variance. At least you do not have some form of variance that is out of control, right? That is unpredictable, right? So that's basically, you know what variance or variation is all about. And you notice that I keep using the word variance or variation interchangeably, but let's stick with variation for now. So when we say variation, we're talking about differences across products or services, within the same operation, right? Awesome, fantastic. So let's talk about ways in which variations can be measured. So how do I measure variation? Right, and there are two major ways. In fact, there are a lot of ways, but for the purpose of what we're talking about today, we'll look at two of the major ways where how we can measure variation. Right, one of such ways is what is called variance. Right, variance is a statistical measure, so it's a parameter, and we'll not get into the technical stuff today, but eventually we'll talk about all of that. But I want you to know that in statistics, variance is a measure that allows us to measure how far a particular set of parameters are from a standard, right? So the standard in this case could be an average. So let's say, for instance, I have a volume, right, for my drinks. I have an average volume of 50 cl, and then I take some samples, right? If I measure some samples, some are 51, some are 48, some are 55, right? So I want to know what is the variance, right, for each of these samples, or in my samples that I've taken, how far each of those samples or the usual samples away from that standard, right? So if my standard or my average is 50 cl, how far do I expect my samples to be away from 50 cl, right? So that's one measure of variance. The other measure is called standard deviation, and it's just a step ahead of variance, right? Again, this is also a statistical measure that we'll get to eventually, right? But I just want to drop it here. So standard deviation also measures how far this parameter is from that average, right? Fantastic. So the next major thing that we're going to talk about are the two major causes of variation, right? And the first major type of or cause of variation is known as common cause, and then the second type is called special causes, right? So let's talk about common cause first of all. So common cause variation is a kind of variation that is inherent in the process, right? So the operators or the actors in these operations do not have control over this variation. It happens naturally, and that's why it's sometimes called natural variation or random variation. So let's take the case of being in traffic. So you're on your way to work every morning, and you will notice that on your way to work, for instance, like Lagos, like Nigeria, you might encounter traffic lights, right? Traffic stop. So you have to wait in the traffic lights, wait for it. If it takes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, how long it takes, it gets to green, and then you move, right? You move to the next portion of the road, you have another traffic light, and then what you notice is that there are days when you are in quotes lucky now, and then you get to the traffic lights within 30 seconds is green, you've moved. Or in fact, in some cases, the moment you are approaching the traffic light, it turns green, you just move to the next one, it turns green, and you know that, oh my, this is going to be a very good day. Right? And so what you notice is that all things being equal, if you look at a sample of 3, 4, 5 days, you will notice that it will take you on average within a particular period of time, right? So let's say it takes you 10 to 15 minutes on average to get to your office every day. That is a variation that is normal. So some days it takes you 10 minutes, some days it takes you 12 minutes, some days it takes you 15 minutes, but on average it's 10 to 15. So let's say an average of about 12.5, right? 12.5 minutes every day, right? So you can log that in and say, you know what, I'll be in the office within 15 minutes, and you'll be well within a very close estimate, right? Now, but imagine if something happens on the road. So a truck falls down on the road, or there's a major accident, and then it takes you 30 minutes or 1 hour, or in fact 2 hours. That's no longer a common cause, and that takes us to the second type or variation, that's a special cause, because now this is out, this is something that was assignable. This is something that you can assign to something in particular. Something caused this variation, right? So in the first example, it was common cause or natural cause or random cause, because as a result of the processes, you might have some slight variations here and there. You, as the operator or the actor in this process, you have little or no control, right, in such kind of variation. That's for the common cause. But for special causes, they are usually as a result of an unusual event. So something happens that is special, that that changes the course of your operations, right? That takes you off. And usually for special causes, right, there are things that if you properly planned well or you knew ahead of time, you could have avoided them, right? So you have some form of control. So let's say, in the example about the accident on the road, if you listen to the radio or you got some form of report, somebody had told you earlier, right, that something has happened on the road, or don't pass this route, or change your route, right? Or you even enter the traffic, and the moment you see that this is not normal, I should have passed this place and it stands still, then I need to take an alternative route, right? So you can do something about special causes, but for common causes you can't do anything about it because it's inherent in the process, right? So the mistake you would make, right, is to try and be adjusting or be trying to do something about a common cause, because when you try to adjust when you have a common cause as a resulting, as what is causing the variation, you're going to create more variation for yourself. So let's say, for instance, there is no accident on the road, nothing happens on the road, it is just common cause, right? Traffic light is just doing its job. And for some reason, you're in a hurry and you're impatient and you don't want to wait for the traffic light. You say, oh no, let me change my route. What happens? You change your route and then you go and meet another traffic light, or something else happens, and then you now spend longer than you should have even spent, even if you waited for the lights to go normally, right? So what's important here, and the major takeaway here, is that it's important for you to know what kind of variation you're dealing with. Am I dealing with a variation that is caused by something that is common, or am I dealing with a variation that is caused by something that is special, right? A quick recap again: for common causes, it's inherent in the process, you can't do anything about it. Whereas for special causes, it's usually as a result of an unusual event, right? It's also called assignable cause, right? Because it's something that has caused, that is special, that has happened, right, in this process, right? I hope this portion has been clear so far. So let's move to the next portion of this discussion, which is the solution. So how do we solve for variance? How do we reduce variance or even eliminate variance in our processes, right? So there are two major buckets that I like to think about it, how you can reduce variance in your process, reduce variation in your process. The first bucket is prevention and the second bucket is inspection, right? So let's look at the prevention bucket, right? So for the prevention bucket, the first thing you want to do to prevent variation is to use an SOP, right? What we call standard operating procedure, or to use a recipe, right? What we call a master recipe, or a recipe, or what some people call a bill of materials, right? Or a standard work. So what we are saying here is that have a particular method. So let's say you're trying to, let's go back to our eatery example, right? What will make me build or cook the same kind of jollof rice day in, day out, is if I have a recipe that is very detailed, that tells me this is the quantity of rice to use, this is the quantity of salt, this is the quantity of water, this is how long it will take, boil for 10 minutes, do this for 30 minutes, cut it in this portion, and then anyone can follow that recipe and expect to get the same thing, right? So the mistake you would make is to, allow people use their skill, and then when the person that is not skillful is operating or doing your process, the person does it anyhow, another person comes and it's like, oh no, I want this person to do my own because I know that this person will do something good, right? So what you want to do in your process is to have a recipe, is to have a standard, right, for your operations, and that is going to make it easy for you to repeat, to have that consistency day in, day out, right? Another thing you want to do under prevention is to design for excellence, what I call designing for excellence. And that's to understand what are the usual things that can cause, this special variation, and then design your processes in such a way that you eliminate or reduce the effects of these things. So for instance, Your variation could be caused by people. Maybe you have people who have varying capabilities, right? So how do you design your process in such a way that there's consistent training and evaluation and monitoring for your people to know that the guys who are working with you understand what is required day in, day out. They understand the recipe, they understand the process, they understand, how you do your things, right? So that's on one part. Another area you want to look at is your machines, your equipment. Do your equipment require some form of routine maintenance, routine checks? Because that could be another area for variance, right, or variation. So if you have equipment that are not properly maintained, of course, after a while they'll start giving inconsistent, products, right, outcomes. So I'm manufacturing something, and then I have bearings that are worn out. I have equipment that they are due for maintenance, and then we're just managing them. Of course, you can expect some consistency there, right? Another thing you want to check in all of this is your environment, right? So as you look at all your processes, so how can I monitor each of them and see which of them contributes to variation in my processes, right? So what you want to do is to monitor all of this and build a system, design your process such that all of these areas, your people, your machine, your environment, even the raw materials, right? If you have major variance in the kind of raw material, so let's say that your raw materials require a certain level of water content, protein content, there's a certain weight that is required. You need to make sure that all of that is being adhered to strictly, because that's the only way you can ensure that the finished product will consistently meet that standard, your standard and all. So that's something you want to think about, right? So those are the prevention related solutions that I have for today. In terms of inspection, right, what you can do for inspection is to have what is called a quality assurance team, right? So we have a quality assurance team. We also have a quality control team, and I'll quickly explain the difference here for you. So a quality assurance team or a QA team is in charge of maintaining your processes, maintaining and ensuring that your processes are within standard. So you've set up a standard, right? In your prevention, right? You built an SOP, you built a recipe or whatever, right? So how do I make sure that that standard is what my guys are following? How do I make sure that the process that we've established, right, the process that we've set out is what my team members are using? This is where the quality assurance team comes in, right? So they are going to be checking and ensuring that, oh, we are sticking to standard, we are adhering to standard. So there's some form of compliance checks, right? Random checks, mystery shopper checks. Somebody just comes that they don't even know the person is, part of the team, and the person tries to, follow the process and to see whether there's any form of deviation from that standard, right? So that's what the QA team is majorly going to be focused on doing. For the quality control team, quality control focuses on the after effect of our process. So we've produced that product or we've produced that service, right? So the QC team takes, let's go back to our eatery example. They take they're going to take a plate of jollof rice now and taste it. Does it pass the sensory test, right? Does it taste well? Does it look well? What's the appearance like? So we are testing what has been produced already, right? We're testing the process, we're testing the service or product to say, what, does this match our expectation of what the final product should look like, right? So what you want to do is to make sure that your QA guys have locked in and ensure that the processes are airtight and are duly followed. And then you can now expect that as we check the outcome, right, as we check the products, as we check the outcome of the service, right, it meets that standard, right? So a quick recap again. The QA guys will check the process, the QC guys will check the products, right? They will check the outcome, right? We check the process with QA and we check the outcome with QC. All right, I hope this has been worth your while. So much to talk about in this episode, and I have a simple task for you today, right? So the simple task for you today is to identify all the possible areas for variation in your system, in your processes, in your operations, and then categorize them into common causes and special causes, right? The beauty of categorizing them is that it allows you to know what is within your control, what you can do something about, and what you cannot do something about, right? So, but even if you cannot do something about your common causes, at least now you're aware that this is something that is inherent, and it sets the tone of how you market your products, what you tell your customers. So you can tell your customers that, you know what, you can expect that your product is between this to this, right? Because you know that with your common variation is going to, occur within these variants, right? Whereas for your special courses or your special variation, you know that this is something that you need to face head on, right? You need to have a strategy to solving them, to eliminating them, to reducing them, to, attacking them head on, right? All right, fantastic. Fantastic. I trust you've been able to pick something from today's episode, and I look forward to hearing about your success. For more content like this and to keep in touch, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Tolu Alao. You can also subscribe and follow me on YouTube, also at Tolu Alao. Until next time, just give me something simple and light.